Chinese stocks are on track for their best week in almost 2 decades following a series of stimulus measures from the central bank. Sri Lanka's new government is set to begin crucial funding negotiations with the IMF, and we look at why 8 out of 10 small businesses in Nigeria fail within 5 years. Hello, I'm Taiba Aydin with the latest business and finance news here on TRT World. Chinese stocks continued their upward trend on Friday, on track for their best week in 16 years. That's as a series of stimulus measures from the central bank helped investors' sentiment rise. Mainland CSI 300 climbed more than 4%, up 15% this week, its best weekly performance since November 2008, when China announced a similar stimulus package in response to the global financial crisis. While Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index is set for a weekly gain of around 13%, its best week since 1998. That's as the People's Bank of China lowered the reserve requirement ratio for banks by 50 basis points as part of a series of measures announced on Tuesday to support the country's capital markets, stabilize a property sector crisis and boost domestic consumption in order to meet its economic growth target of 5% for the year. The move will free up about 1 trillion yuan, or around $143 billion in new lending, with the central bank leaving room for another cut this year. Let's get more on this now with Farah Murad in Dubai. She's a senior market analyst at Equity Group. Good to see you, Farah. Now, it's been a week full of rate cuts for China. How significant are these measures in spurring growth in the country?
Thank you, Taiba, for having me. I believe China is finally ready to be serious about reviving the economy. Now that the federal bank, they moved away from their hawkish stance. Previously, we saw some modest move from China. The main worry was more stimulus, lower interest rate would add more pressure on the yuan, which wasn't really something they could support at the moment. So given this 50 basis point surprise rate cut from the Fed, I believe now we will see even more. Yes, as you said, we saw lower interest rate. We saw a push for companies to buy back their shares. This 1 trillion stimulus, I think it's a really good step. It's not enough. Some voices in China, they're speaking about 10 trillion yuan, which is almost 1 trillion. It would dwarf what we saw before, maybe during the crisis of 2008. But compared to what we saw from the US, 3 trillion, I believe it's fair. We still believe that China's market is kind of interesting because of a lower valuation they have at the moment. Maybe picking and choosing some sectors would be the smartest move for investors. But I believe we will see more aggressive moves from China. It's still not the end of it. We will see more. And it's still a high-risk, high-reward market.
And can we expect some more stimulus measures in the near future?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. With lower, weaker dollar, I believe that now there's more room for China to introduce and inject more liquidity in the market, lower mortgage rate, supporting lending. I think the main thing they need to focus on is consumption. Consumption is almost over 80% of the GDP. And with the target of 5% growth, they really need to support that, especially when it comes to lower middle income. I think this is where they need to work the hardest. And I think it's really too early to say that this is it. We will see more stimulus. I think the question is how it would be targeted. And that's what the investors and market would care about the most.
Meanwhile, China's industrial profits plunged by more than 17% in the latest reading. What's behind the fall in China's manufacturing growth?
I mean, sometimes the title can be misleading. It is definitely not a good data, especially compared to the previous month where growth was really good. But then again, we're comparing it a yearly comparison, and previously last year in August we had really good growth, so definitely there's this base effect. Now also, if I want to check some details of this report, yes, we do have some industries showing lower growth, especially when it comes to mining, maybe oil industry as well. But then again, we have some industries that are gaining, and this emphasized the point that our exposure to China should be more selective. Manufacturing was doing good. State-owned companies, they were doing not so much, but companies related to Taiwan, to Hong Kong, they showed good gains. So I still emphasize on the point, our exposure to China we shouldn't shy away from it, but also we should be selective, especially on maybe industries that are related to international markets more than domestic one.
Okay, Farah Murad, we will have to leave it there, but thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now a quick look at some of the other top business stories from around the world. China's industrial profits fell by 17.8% in August, marking the steepest decline in over a year. This sharp drop follows a 4.1% increase in July. The plunge is largely due to a high base from the previous year, when profits grew 17.2%. Overall, profits for the first 8 months of the year rose by just 0.5%. Core inflation in Tokyo hit 2% in September, matching the Bank of Japan's target. This solid inflation data keeps hopes alive for a potential interest rate hike in December or early next year. Consumer prices slowed from 2.4% in August due to government subsidies on utility bills. Tokyo's inflation is seen as a key indicator for nationwide trends. Argentina's poverty rate soared from 42% to 53% during the first 6 months of President Javier Milei's austerity measures. This marks the highest poverty levels since 2003, reflecting the intense economic hardship caused by the government's fiscal policies. Meanwhile, inflation has dropped from 25.5% to 4.2% month-on-month, but annual inflation still exceeds 230%. Despite the struggles, Milei's shock therapy has been supported by foreign investors and the IMF. And Intel is nearing an $8.5 billion funding deal with the US government to boost domestic chip production as part of the CHIPS and Science Act. Facing financial struggles, Intel's cost-cutting has attracted interest from rivals like Qualcomm. The deal would mark a key win for President Biden ahead of the election, reinforcing his focus on strengthening US semiconductor manufacturing. Still ahead on the program, we find out why nearly 80% of small businesses in Nigeria fail within their 5 years. After the break. Just days after being sworn in as Sri Lanka's new president, Anura Kumara Dissanayake says he'll soon resume negotiations with the International Monetary Fund. The leftist president wants to make austerity measures more manageable for the poor as the country battles a severe economic crisis. Omar Bakkalolo has the story.
Over the past few years, Sri Lanka has faced a series of economic disasters. Its economy, heavily dependent on tourism, was hit hard by the 2019 terror attacks, which scared off visitors. Then, the global pandemic dealt a further blow, crippling the country's key industries. Years of undertaxation and major policy mistakes only worsened the situation, pushing Sri Lanka to the brink of bankruptcy in 2022. As the crisis deepened, protests erupted, forcing the government to turn to the International Monetary Fund for a $2.9 billion bailout. This lifeline helped stabilize the economy, but it came with tough austerity measures. The government announced steep tax hikes, subsidy cuts, and public service pay freezes, leaving many citizens struggling. Now, the newly elected president, Anura Kumara Dissanayake, wants to change this.
Achieving stability and confidence in the current economy is crucial. We plan to begin negotiations with the International Monetary Fund immediately and proceed with activities related to the extended credit facility. Additionally, to advance our debt restructuring program, we are negotiating with relevant creditors to expedite the process and secure necessary debt relief.
But renegotiating the bailout deal won't be easy. Analysts say the IMF is unlikely to bend on key conditions.
So I think there are certain red lines that the IMF will not agree to negotiate. Perhaps two of them one is on the fiscal side, the primary balance target, which is 2.3% going into next year. And the second one is that there cannot be any change to the central bank law, which makes the bank independent, where their primary mandate is price stability.
As the newly formed government hopes to ease the burden on austerity, many Sri Lankans remain cautious. After years of political instability and unfulfilled promises, trust is in short supply.
I am not aligned to any party or ideology, and this time I voted for a new person to see if he can deliver on his promises. I wish for a change, however, I have very low hopes.
We didn't see any change on the ground for the last 7-6 years. We can't be sure about the developments over the next 5 years, but we hope something good will happen. It would be good for us, or else we will see.
Many citizens are still reeling from the effects on inflation, which hit a peak of 70% in 2022. Although the rupee has stabilized, real wages remain far below pre-crisis levels. So, while the new president offers some relief, the road ahead for Sri Lanka is far from easy. Ömer Bakaloğlu, TRT World.
For more, we're joined by Irfan Iqbal in London. He's chief editor at Sonakar. Welcome to the programme, Irfan. Now, how have the austerity measures implemented under the previous administration affected the average Sri Lankan citizen? And what changes do you anticipate with the new president's approach?
Well, indeed, the effect was huge. That's what led people to take to the streets and protest and all what you just broadcasted. People were totally upset about everything because literally in simple terms, it led to a bankruptcy. So people wanted a change and they wanted to come out of it. They need to make sure that their lives are getting onto a better track than it was. I think we also have to give a credit to the interim president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, who managed to pull out the country from where it was, from the previous regime, Gotabaya Rajapaksa's government, which led to the bankruptcy. So in a simple term, we can say that it was in a better position than it was before Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe into 2019. So the current president has some sort of a relief that he has got into a position where he can build up the nation.
And what specific aspects of the IMF agreement do you believe President Dissanayake should prioritise in the upcoming negotiations that would benefit the poor?
I think most importantly, the agricultural subsidies. I think the current president, the newly elected one, is moving in the right direction. I did see that the government has released a press release yesterday saying that from the October 10th or the beginning of October, they will be providing subsidies to the farmers directly paying into their own bank accounts rather than going through the systematic process of going through government agents and then getting it delayed. So I think, and also they've increased it from 15,000 rupees per hectare to 25,000 rupees, which is a good thing. I think this is what they need to prioritize, and I am glad that they are doing it in the right way and they are moving in the right direction from day one.
How flexible is the IMF typically with countries seeking to renegotiate terms, and what factors might influence their willingness to accommodate Sri Lanka's new requests?
I think that is a huge question all around the globe because IMF is normally not flexible at all since it goes through a rigorous process. because they start with something and then the board has to approve. Obtaining the approval from the board takes a lot of time. So I think IMF, in clear terms, they are not that much flexible. But having said that, there are exceptions. Exceptions comes, we've seen the exceptions. One of the examples I can put forward is the bailout provided to Greece in 2016, whereas IMF had to flexibly bend their policy in order to accommodate Greece and extend in order to let Greece, the administration, take care of the things and move in the right direction. I think if at all required, IMF should and can have the same type of flexible policy in Sri Lanka. But I hope this government, which has been newly elected, has the right ingredients to make it forward. And I'm so glad that the newly elected president, in his inaugural speech itself, he referred to this particular issue and said that the government will be engaging in this discussion with IMF so that they can move forward, I think, which is the right thing. In the past, there were so many issues, negative campaigns against the involvement of IMF from the left side of the politics. But since the government itself, apparently it's a left-leaning government, but to hear from the leader itself saying that they are going to engage with the IMF, I think it's a good thing.
Right, we will have to wait and see how flexible the IMF can be with Sri Lanka. Irfan Iqbal, Chief Editor at Sonaca, thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Nigeria's informal economy plays a vital role in the nation's economy, contributing to its overall GDP. However, small businesses, particularly those in operation for less than 5 years, face significant hurdles such as limited access to credit and harsh economic conditions. With proper financial inclusion and government support, these businesses could thrive and contribute even more to Nigeria's economic growth. Nearly 80% of small businesses in Nigeria fail before their 5th year, according to the 2024 Informal Economy Report. Only 13% of small businesses survive for over a decade, highlighting the difficulty of sustaining long-term growth. Factors like lack of access to capital, multiple taxations, and harsh economic environments have stifled business resilience. Nigeria's informal sector accounts for more than 50% of the country's gross domestic product. Key industries such as retail, food and drinks, and agriculture make up 58.6% of informal businesses. Despite its economic contribution, many businesses in the sector are excluded from formal banking and financial opportunities. Without formal financial inclusion, many businesses are unable to access development grants and government support. The report urges the Nigerian government to design programs that improve access to financing and help formalize the informal sector. Nigeria is the 8th largest oil exporter in the world in terms of value, but due to the absence of an effective pipeline and railway cargo system, nearly 80% of petroleum products gets to users by road. And this leads to hundreds of petrol tanker accidents every year, killing hundreds of people. Timothy Obu-Ezu joined one tanker driver on a bumpy ride.
With 60,000 liters of highly inflammable fuel on Nigerian roads like this, tanker driver Musa Idris is sitting on a ticking time bomb. He's been doing this for 18 years and he knows the danger only too well.
Whenever I step out of the house, my family will be on their knees praying to God for my return. Our main problem is the road. About 2 years ago, my truck fell and burnt to ashes. It was only God that saved my life. And now I've been on the road for 15 days. My truck has broken down 3 times.
Nigeria has an aging 5,000-kilometer oil pipeline across the country, but vandalism has forced suppliers to transport about 50 million liters of gasoline consumed daily on often bad roads. And whenever oil tankers crash, locals scramble to scoop fuel, adding to the number of casualties. The country's road safety corps says more than 500 people were killed in about 1,500 tanker accidents in 2020 alone. And in early September, about 50 people were burned alive along with dozens of cows when a tanker collided head-on with a truckload of cattle. We are now in Niger State in central Nigeria, where the latest deadly tanker blast happened. Idris tells me it's a stark reminder of the deadly journey he has to navigate each time he takes to the road. Oil is a top contributor to Nigeria's economy, but safety related to its transportation has been a major concern. Analysts blame the government for negligence and rampant corruption.
Where this is happening goes to say that certain things are not done right. Certain persons who should be responsible for either issuing guidelines or sanctioning or tracking all of these things are not doing what they should do.
The Petrol Tanker Drivers Association wants the government's intervention.
Let the federal government come to our aid to at least, even if they will not do the road properly, let them do some kind of palliative in the splash point so that we'll find it easy to navigate, to carry this product.
Authorities say they're trying to regulate hours of service and size limits for trucks in a bid to stop accidents. But until the roads are less treacherous, drivers like Idris will continue to confront the danger that could be fatal. Timothy Obiezu, Charity World, Maje, Niger State, Nigeria.
Thousands of people have gathered in Hanover to protest against Volkswagen's cost-cutting plans, which may include factory closures and layoffs. The potential cuts mark a major shift for the German carmaker and could also end a long-standing protection pledge, as Malik Fouda explains.
Thousands of people in Hanover make their voices heard following Volkswagen's drastic cost-cutting program.
Dear colleagues, there are considerably more than 3,000 of us here, and this will only be the beginning. If the management does not finally set its sights right and get back on the path of reason, dear colleagues.
The German car group has announced it may close its factories in the country for the first time in its 87-year history. Thousands of jobs could now be on the line, along with a 3-decade-long protection agreement. Once seen as an engine of the German economic growth, Volkswagen is now at a crossroads. Unions warn that closing plants would be a historic mistake.
So the mood ranges from anger to despair and resignation. It's all there.
The company has previously announced factory closures in Belgium and China, and it follows years of declining profits at its passenger car brand. VW stocks have fallen 60% since 2021. Market capitalization is now just over $50 billion. The figure is not only below Chinese rivals like BYD and Xiaomi, but also European competitors like Ferrari, which is worth double. In 2017, VW delivered 17.4 million cars, briefly claiming the title of the world's largest automaker from Toyota. But now, BYD holds the title. So what went wrong for Volkswagen? The pressure from Chinese competitors is unprecedented. They're not only beating VW in innovation, but also in market appeal. The slogan, "In China, for China," reflects growing preference for local manufacturers. Volkswagen has also been hit hard by the loss of the Russian market. After the war on Ukraine, public pressure and government policies made it impossible to continue operations there. The outlook across Europe isn't much brighter. Many countries are grappling with economic challenges, while Chinese automakers have made significant inroads into the European markets. European tariffs on Chinese cars have also backfired. As the so-called people's car, Volkswagen relies heavily on its operations in China.
Volkswagen does not belong to shareholders alone. Volkswagen also belongs to us.
With its iconic cars, Volkswagen was once a symbol of freedom and an inspiration for numerous books and TV series like Mad Men. But the road ahead for the German automaker is now looking a lot more troubled. Malik Fouda, TRT World.
Well, that's all your business news for now. Thanks for watching.